CBC News, The World This Hour. I'm Blake Prendergast. As of today, Manitoba's strict COVID-19 lockdown goes into effect. With the provincial infection rate surging, gatherings are now limited to 5 people. Churches are banned from holding in-person services, and non-essential businesses and restaurants are limited to curbside pickup or delivery. Cameron McIntosh reports.
Shaving and trimming their way through their last customers, Barbara West Capulong spent the final hours before lockdown trying to keep up his staff's morale.
It's not amazing, but I think they're all open-minded.
As of midnight, all non-essential businesses in Manitoba were ordered closed. Gatherings are restricted to 0. It's urgent. 1/3 of Manitoba ICU patients are COVID patients. The system is getting strained.
These next few weeks are going to be difficult for many.
Dr. Brent Rusin is Manitoba's chief medical officer.
But this sacrifice over this time will save lives. It will allow our healthcare system to continue to function.
Later today, the federal government will announce targeted aid to Manitoba businesses. Thing is, no one knows how long this will last. Capelong is trying to adapt.
Just use the time to basically learn how to pivot and to learn new things about our business, about ourselves.
Above all, he needs this lockdown to work. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
New modeling expected today from Ontario will reveal how the second wave of COVID-19 could play out in the coming weeks. Just 2 weeks ago, officials were predicting up to 1,200 cases a day by this time, but the province is already well past that number and still breaking records. Mike Crawley has the details.
Right now, Ontario is seeing more than 1,200 new cases a day, with no flattening of the curve in sight. Ashley Chute is an epidemiologist at the University of Toronto.
I don't think there's any reason to conclude that we wouldn't reach 2,000 cases a day.
That's how many cases a team of Toronto-based scientists and doctors forecasts for Ontario by early December. Chute is not part of that team, but she believes that unless the province clamps down soon, that projection will come true.
We're on this trajectory, and we're not doing enough at this point to change that trajectory.
The modeling is expected to show both the projected trend in new cases and the likely impact on Ontario's hospitals. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's chief public health officer says it's important to remember the vast majority of Canadians remain susceptible to COVID-19. Dr. Theresa Tam's comments come as new cases are being reported at record pace from BC to Quebec. Tam says the country is on its way to registering 4,000 new infections a week for the entire month of November. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland appears before the Senate Finance Committee today. She's facing questions about the Trudeau government's COVID-19 aid initiatives, specifically Bill C-9. It extends the federal wage subsidy until next summer and retools the commercial rent relief program. A judge in the Northwest Territories dismissed more than 50 charges in court this week because a Crown prosecutor missed her flight. CBC's Anna Demera reports.
The Hay River Courthouse was the scene of a unique legal drama this week. 53 charges against 14 people were dismissed before Monday's court, all because Crown prosecutor Mina Connolly was a no-show. She got to the airport a few minutes late for the half-hour flight from Yellowknife to Hay River.
I had to be on the flight and I wasn't.
Judges in the territory could allow prosecutors to attend court over the phone if they're facing a travel issue. But Judge Donovan Malloy refused the request and dismissed most of the charges for want of prosecution. The cases include impaired driving, assault, and breach of a restraining order. As for the matters that were thrown out, they could still come back before the court. The Crown has up to 60 days to appeal Judge Malloy's decision. Anna Demera, CBC News, Hay River, Northwest Territories.
And that is your World This Hour. From CBC News, I'm Blake Prendergast.
From CTV News at 7:33 a.m. today. Hello, I'm Catherine Dow from the CTV Newsroom in Winnipeg. Here are the top stories. Canada's new hotspot for COVID-19 infection starts a major lockdown today to try to control its caseload. Manitoba suffered its deadliest day of the pandemic yesterday with 9 new deaths. Bars, museums, and theaters are closed and recreational activities are being suspended. Schools will remain open. Ontario will release updated COVID-19 modeling numbers today. This after setting another record for daily cases at more than 1,400. Premier Doug Ford says he can't rule out another lockdown if cases keep climbing at such an alarming rate. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has chosen his longtime advisor, Ron Klain, as his first chief of staff. Klain ran Biden's office during his first term as vice president. He was also the head of the Ebola response for the Obama White House and ran Al Gore's recount battle in Florida after the 2000 election. And defending champion Tiger Woods will be among those hitting the links today as the pandemic-delayed Masters tees off today at Augusta National. Instead of this year's first major, it will be the last, following the pandemic-delayed PGA Championship and U.S. Open. The British Open was cancelled. For all the day's top stories and breaking news as it happens, tune to CTV News Channel or go online to ctvnews.ca. I'm Catherine Dow.
From CNBC Tech Check at 5:09 p.m. yesterday.
I'm Aditi Roy, and here's your CNBC Tech Check. Apple has unveiled a new lineup of Mac models. They're the first to contain chips produced in-house rather than longtime supplier Intel. The new M1 chip will power a new MacBook Air starting at $999, a Mac Mini desktop computer starting at $699, and a new 13-inch MacBook Pro starting at $1299. Bottom line, Apple says these Macs will boast faster performance and better battery life, up to 20 hours in the new MacBook Pro. All 3 Mac products are ready to order and will be available in stores starting next week. Meantime, Lyft appears to be following in the footsteps of Uber. Executives saying the company is working on a new service to expand into food delivery. It's a bid to make up for the slow recovery in its ride-hailing business from the pandemic. Lyft plans to offer delivery for restaurants without launching a full-fledged consumer platform. The company is also aiming to undercut the fees Uber Eats, Grubhub, and other services charge restaurants for every order, which has drawn opposition from some restaurants and lawmakers. And TikTok's parent company has filed a legal petition challenging the Trump administration's bid to force a sale of its U.S. operations. ByteDance saying it has not heard from the White House in weeks on whether its proposed plan would be accepted or if it would be given a 30-day extension. President Trump had previously signed an executive order requiring ByteDance to divest its ownership by Thursday. That's all from the West Coast. See you back here tomorrow.
From DW News Brief at 7 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. China has condemned the mass resignation of pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong as, quote, political farce and a blatant challenge. The opposition bloc resigned en masse after 4 of their colleagues were expelled from parliament for what China described as being unpatriotic. The pro-democracy lawmakers staged a final protest in the assembly and have vowed to fight on. Germany's public health body is warning that it's expecting an uncontrolled spread of COVID-19 infections in some parts of the country. Numbers of confirmed cases are still rising rapidly despite a partial national lockdown. Chancellor Angela Merkel is urging people to remain vigilant. Restrictions are likely to stay in place over the winter. Polish nationalists and right-wing extremists have clashed with police during a march through the capital Warsaw. Police say several of their officers were injured. Thousands defied a pandemic-related ban to take part in the event. November 11 is celebrated as Independence Day in Poland. This is DW News from Berlin. Follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at DW News. And do visit our website, dw.com.
From Bloomberg First Word at 6:52 a.m. today.
President Trump suffered 2 setbacks as he tried to claim victory in the state of Arizona. The state's Republican Attorney General told Fox Business it was highly unlikely the president would catch up when remaining ballots are counted. He also said he has found no evidence of widespread fraud that the Trump campaign has alleged. The American pandemic's longest increase in coronavirus infections appears poised to get even longer. The nationwide rise in cases is now in its 9th week. Authorities reported more than 145,000 new cases yesterday, an all-time high, and the 7-day average for deaths has climbed above 1,000 for the first time since August. The British economy expanded the most on record in the third quarter. Growth surged 15.5% after falling almost 20% in the second quarter. Still, the recovery is less than any of its G7 peers. Meanwhile, there's been an increase in coronavirus cases, and British output in September was the worst since April. China and 14 other Asia-Pacific nations are close to a deal on the world's largest free trade agreement. It could be completed this weekend. The partnership also includes Japan, Australia and New Zealand. It will be the culmination of Beijing's decade-long quest for great economic integration. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Rishka Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
Guys. All right, let's go to podcasting.
Okay, hot take. Cable news is bad for your brain. They gotta fill 24 hours a day, and we found out the hard way what that means when you've got a president who says reckless stuff just about 24 hours a day. But something strange has been happening in the past few days on the American cable news networks. They have been cutting away from the guy who lies. We're going to talk about the significance of that on today's show, but we're going to start with a look at how they handled election week, because if you were watching, as our guest Eric Wemple from the Washington Post was, it was impossible to miss just how much power the cable news networks have over our democracy.
Well, they certainly have power over our emotions.
All right, stand by. We have a key race alert right now. New numbers have just come in.
That's where we begin with the CNN Key Race Alert.
Key Race Alert.
You may be exaggerating it just a little bit because, of course, they're not county boards of elections. But since the county boards of elections are so slow in counting and certifying votes, the networks historically have stepped in to make these calls on races once they feel they have sufficient data.
It's official now. NBC projects Florida goes to President Donald Trump.
And they spend months and months and months modeling turnout and results for swing states, and that's basically why we tune into the networks on election night, is to see how those swing states are going. It's really, really kind of a unique part of United States media because nobody else really does it. The networks have kind of a monopoly on this situation where they model everything out and they forecast and then they make calls.
As my colleague Andrew Prokop told me on Friday when Vox and its election partner Decision Desk called Biden the winner, calling these races is more of an art than a science.
Prokop is right that it's more of an art than a science. If it were a science, everybody would be out there, with their programs and they'd be doing it on their own computer, reaching their own conclusions. But you see the way it's sort of bifurcated now. The AP and Fox News have their own little partnership, and that partnership is with the University of Chicago. They do all these surveys, like 140,000 surveys across all the states. ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN have something else which is called the National Election Pool, which relies heavily on exit polls and is done in coordination with Edison Research. And they get really a lot of the data from these partnerships. And once the data comes flowing in, when one candidate no longer has a path to election, they call it for the other one. They do weight things differently, and that's where the art versus the science comes in. There's no uniform, widely accepted formula for figuring out who's going to win Wisconsin. but it really is heavily quantitative. You can't just wing it.
Have the networks ever gotten it wrong? Has anyone ever called the wrong state for the wrong candidate?
Well, yes. I mean, back in 2000.
Stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column.
The 2000 recount and the fiasco on election night serves as the entire point of reference for where we are now. That was a complete fiasco because they called Florida, then uncalled Florida, and then nobody had any idea where Florida was. And so they brought all the heads of the networks up on Capitol Hill.
Since 1990, when the first joint polling and projection effort began, we've been involved in nearly 900 elections around the nation. The methods that we use to project winners in those races have only been wrong once before. In other words, we've been right 99.8% of the time. Unfortunately, when you make a mistake as glaring as calling Al Gore the winner in Florida, the number of times you've been right seems less relevant.
Another big failure, of course, was the 2016 exit polling and the regular election polling, which made people feel less comfortable in their assumptions and in their data and the degree to which they understood the electorate. Now, we had a huge polling problem this year as well, where many of the swing states were way off, beyond the margin of error. So, I mean, there have been a lot of failures. So I think that over time, these network producers have become more humble about the ability of these experts to sort of figure out what the country is thinking.
But once CNN did make the call on Saturday morning, it seemed like the whole world fell in line almost within, 20 minutes. It was
right.
MSNBC.
Biden is being called.
Fox News.
The Fox News decision desk can now project that former Vice President Joe Biden will win Pennsylvania and Nevada.
New York Times honking in the streets. Champagne sold out in Washington, D.C.
It was eerie to me. Was it not eerie to you? I mean, they're like, well, we all reached the same conclusion at exactly the same time. I mean, that's just bullshit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you would have to suppose that they all shared the model, right? They all shared the model and that they all reached the same conclusion at the same time. To me, it was like, oh, man, this is not a good look, right? Like, if this were really independent, you would have CNN, calling it on Saturday 11, and then maybe NBC would reach the same conclusion at 7 p.m. that evening or something, and one or two of them would still be stragglers out there right now. But no, it's all over in 20 minutes. That, to me, struck me as really like, oh, man, this really is a mirage. This is the third mirage there was the red mirage, the blue mirage, and then the network mirage.
And it might not be helping matters as the outgoing guy is doing everything he can to make Americans doubt the veracity of these election calls.
I think you're on to something here. This is really an idiosyncratic part of the way we run our country. The networks are sitting there with this process that everybody hangs on. And we don't have really an analog to it in other parts of our civic life, where so much trust and confidence is being placed in the ability of these networks to figure out before the counties certify their vote what's going to happen. And I think that over the past 2 decades, since 2000, the networks have come to grips with just how important it is and just how much power is vested in them. And so I think that's why it took until Saturday at 11:24 or whenever it was for them to take this step.
Every time we got a new vote, it just reaffirmed that was the pattern, and the idea that Trump is going to overturn this with provisional ballots that are, we can already see have quite a few Democrats in them that traditionally are extremely Democratic. The idea that Donald Trump is suddenly going to win 96% of that vote or something like that, it's just the implausibility, I think, just finally reached the critical threshold.
I would like to ask all the assembled network heads right now, why is it that you all clustered around 10 or 15 minutes to make one of the most important calls, in modern American history, and you all say that you have different proprietary approaches to calling the elections? It just, on some level, doesn't make a lot of sense.
after the break, Fox and Frenemies. Support for the show today once again comes from Bowl and Branch. They make those good sheets. They got the organic cotton sheets that are Bowl. You can be H if you...
This is advertiser content.
Arvell Wallace.
Accident.
Historic look at the disease of racism in America.
Best chance.
Streaming wherever you...
Blue. Did we just call it?
It was the longest.
Did we make a call in Arizona? Arizona, 11 electoral votes?
Yes.
Okay, time out. This is a big development.
Yeah.
The Fox News decision desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden.
Eric, let's talk about the moment Fox News, emphasis on news, not those opinion dudes who dominate primetime, but let's talk about the moment that Fox News kind of broke up with Donald Trump. It starts with their calling Arizona for Joe Biden, right?
Yes, that was 11:20 on Tuesday night that Fox called Arizona and basically threw a big stink bomb in all of the places where Trump and his buddies were pretty much celebrating, high-fiving.
How did President Trump react to the Fox News call?
Trump reacted viciously, as did his inner circle. They all pounded Fox News to retract the call. And this is what you're getting at, Sean. This is a perfect example of what you're getting at. Why on earth, think about this, why on earth really would they care what the hell Fox News says about Arizona? Ultimately, Arizona is going to decide the vote, right? Unless you believe that somehow Fox News is in the counting room and, making decisions of its own, or that the county Board of Elections has moved its offices to Fox News on Avenue of the Americas in New York City, then it makes no sense. But they all pressured Fox to retract this.
It made for one of the most dramatic moments of the night as Fox Decision Desk Director Arnon Mishkin came under fire.
We're getting a lot of incoming here, and we need you to answer some questions.
I'm sorry, the president is not going to be able to take over and win enough votes to eliminate that 7-point lead.
It shows that PR is a big part of this, and the other part of it is the degree of ownership that the Trump people feel over Fox News. I mean, after all, if Hannity is basically doing your propaganda for 4 or 5 years, you start to feel as though you own him, right? I mean, really. And so that's what, in my view, this nasty reaction really showed, is that they feel they own Fox News.
And that was just the beginning of the fissure between the outgoing guy and the news people over at Fox?
I mean, there's talk of this great fissure, but Trump has hated certain parts of Fox News for, ever since Megyn Kelly asked him about his sexism back in August 2015.
Yeah.
So, he has been inveighing against, the parts of Fox News that have integrity for 5 years. And that includes the polling unit, now the decision desk, and, Shep Smith. And all these people who decide that when they get up in the morning, they're going to try their best to tell the truth, and Trump can't abide it. So Trump has been attacking these people for a really long time. And this is merely a continuation of that. I would hate to sit here and assign more significance to this moment than any other. It's just kind of interesting.
And you'll always have Hannity and Tucker, but there is significance here because these networks, including Fox, have finally started to cut away from the president when he's spreading BS. I mean, this starts with his speech Thursday night.
This speech was a Thursday night, and it occurred during the evening news, so they dipped into it, and then they saw after about 5 to 7 minutes how he was lying so much, which was entirely predictable, and all three of the networks bailed. One after 5 minutes, and the other two after like 7 minutes. But each, to see the way they cut away, in one instance, Trump was saying, I won Georgia by a lot. A lot.
Likewise in Georgia, I won by a lot. A lot.
And I think that was when CBS said, all right, we're out of here.
And there, the President of the United States addressing the American people for the first time. Nancy Cordes is with us. There were a couple of statements that the President made. Do you have a fact check?
Yes, on a number of fronts, Nora. First of all,
they had to basically clean up for the guy, over the next 5 to 7 minutes. And it really is a big job. When you let Trump loose on your airwaves, he creates so many messes, you know? It's like your 8-year-old making cookies, you know? And so the less time you let him run loose on the airwaves, the easier time you have making a more accurate broadcast. And, you know, my argument is that this guy forfeited his privilege of being live on the airwaves many, many years ago.
You know, and it's funny you say that because The Onion had a headline after that cutaway from MSNBC that said something like, major networks cut away from Donald Trump 4 years ago when he starts lying. You know, they've been doing it for 4 years. They've been letting him lie. CNN seems especially on the hook on that front. I mean, why did they let it go on for so long? He's been lying the whole time.
There are a couple reasons in my view. One is it's simply much more difficult to tape a presidential address, fact check it, then produce a package that you present to your audience later. That's a lot of work, okay? It's much easier to just let the guy go, to seat your panel, have them watch and listen, and then just talk about it later, right? That is so much easier. So I'm not in favor of letting Trump speak live, but that's not to say that I favor suppressing the news. In other words, I don't want news outlets to suppress the fact that this happened. I just think there's a responsible way to report on it.
Sure.
And the other consideration is ratings. Yeah. When he does this stuff, he's a substitute for actual news programming.
And it makes money.
It makes money. You're absolutely right. You're 100% right. It makes money. And in the realm of cable news, there is only one metric, just audience. That really is how they keep score. And so it's really important to understanding why they allowed Trump for so long to go live unfiltered.
And now, if you want to be cynical, you can look at the network's willingness to cut away from Donald Trump or his White House press secretary, as Fox News did this week.
We want every legal vote to be counted, and we want every illegal vote to be...
I just think we have to be very clear. She's charging, the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. Unless she has more details to back that up, I can't in good countenance continue showing you this. I want to make sure that...
As an acknowledgement that this era is coming to an end. We have President-elect Joe Biden. We need to figure out a way to move on from Donald Trump. There's less on the line if we cut away from him. Does that mean that nothing was actually learned here? That they waited until he no longer had a political future to finally start cutting away from him?
I think it is kind of pathetic, is what you're getting at. Yeah. You know, we make the call that he's no longer going to be president, and then we decide that we're going to start getting aggressive on his falsehoods on live TV. I think that's not a great sequence if you're trying to run a network that's vested with integrity and responsibility. But I think on some level it is an admission that they've screwed this up for a really long time. But I will say, too, that I wouldn't want to be in the position of being a network head and having to deal with a president who not only lies, but who also gets on TV all the time. It is not a simple and easy situation, but I do think at some level, at some point, like after a few months of this, there really is no excuse for not taking really strong corrective action.
And now we're looking at a Biden presidency which promises to be a lot more conventional and maybe a lot more, blissfully boring than its predecessor. What's that going to do to TV news?
I would be shocked if the ratings don't go through the floor. I think CNN, I think MSNBC are going to be gasping for air. I really do. I think CNN is finally going to have to start using some of its correspondence. It has all like 3,000 news professionals at CNN. Why don't we get on the daytime rotation stories about climate change, stories about racial justice, stories about, stuff that really matter instead of just hanging out at the White House all day. So I think actually it may be a nice, refreshing break from, one-sided, one theme covers the whole time.
The fact that's not lost on President Trump, right? For all his falsehoods and disinformation, he's always said, the networks love me. I'm great for the networks. I make them a ton of money.
100%. 100%. He's incredibly conscious of his ability to boost ratings. In fact, I think that's been the primary motivator of his entire presidency. That's what he really cares about. And that's why I think that one night when they had the dueling town halls and Biden's town hall beat him in the ratings was so incredibly devastating for him. So yeah, it'll be different.
Eric Wemple is a media critic at The Washington Post. I'm Sean Rameswaram. It's Today Explained.
Would. Anyway, coming up on tonight's show.
Welcome to Shondaland Audio. Listen to all the new Shondaland Audio shows on Apple Podcasts.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show. I'm Trevor Noah. Today is Wednesday, the 11th of November, which means, yeah, that's right, 11/11. And in 10 minutes, it's going to be 11/11 on 11/11, which means you can make the ultimate wish. Ooh, I wish a nigga would. Anyway, coming up on tonight's show, Donald Trump will make you rich if you lie. We take a break from all the anxiety with a ray of sunshine, and Halsey is joining us on the show. So let's do this, people. Welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show.
From Trevor's couch in New York City to your couch somewhere in the world, this is the Daily Social Distancing Show with Trevor Noah. Ears Edition.
It has now been 4 or possibly 12 days since Joe Biden was declared president-elect and Kamala Harris's sassy white friend. And since then, he's been busy trying to prepare his team for office. But it's not going smoothly because Donald Trump, one-term president and tenant from hell, is still going through all the stages of grief. Denial, rage tweeting, undermining democracy, and back to denial.
The president's latest moves indicate that he is not ready to concede anytime soon and that he may not leave all that gracefully. Several sources throughout government agencies indicate that President Trump has put out the word through his staff that he does not want any federal agency cooperating with a Biden transition team, and further that he doesn't want any government agency doing anything that would imply that Biden won the election. We're also learning that the White House has started to press these agencies to come out with a budget for next year as if there will be no change at the White House.
One administration official telling the Washington Post, quote, "They're pretending nothing happened. We're all supposed to pretend this is normal and do all this work while we know we're just going to have to throw it away," end quote. The Trump administration is reportedly also continuing to vet new political appointees for jobs in a second Trump term.
President-elect Joe Biden Tuesday criticized President Trump's refusal to concede the election.
I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that, how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy.
Shame, guys. Joe Biden is right. Does Donald Trump really want denying the election results to be his legacy? Because I'd like to remember him as the president who kidnapped kids and helped kill 240,000 Americans, not for this. And please, can somebody tell me, how is Trump still vetting candidates for new jobs? What's that job interview like? So tell me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Nah, bitch, where do you see yourself in 5 weeks? Trump is the kind of captain who would have been taking job applications on the Titanic. So, Daniel, do you have any experience working on a sinking ship? Should we leave? A lot of people are jumping overboard. Don't worry about them. They're just being dramatic. Let me show you where you're going to be sleeping. I mean, guys, it must be so uncomfortable working in the White House right now because everyone around Trump knows he lost, but they've got to all go along with the lie. That's got to be exhausting, especially when you're already running a fever from COVID. But look, I'm sorry, Donald. This just isn't going to work. You can't pretend that everything's fine when the whole entire world saw you get fired. My nigga, if people in Bosnia know you don't have a job, you do not have a job. Honestly, people, I don't think Donald Trump has ever looked more pathetic than this. And yes, I'm including the time he played tennis in his sport diapers. Because the only way that he can overturn the election is to prove that there has been nationwide voter fraud. And the truth is, that's just not panning out.
Election officials in states across the country report to the New York Times no evidence of widespread voter fraud. The Times reached out to top election officials in every state to ask whether they suspected or had evidence of illegal voting. None reported any major voting issues.
As for Pennsylvania, the president claims, and I quote, "Pennsylvania prevented us from watching much of the ballot count." The Trump campaign went to federal court about this. Judge Paul Diamond, a George W. Bush appointee, heard the arguments, and by the end of the hearing, under questioning from the judge, the Trump campaign lawyer admitted, contrary to his initial complaint, that, yeah, there were, in fact, observers present. Similarly, a state judge in Michigan dismissed a lawsuit over access to ballot counting. She cited a lack of admissible evidence and whether the campaign had even sued the right party. In Georgia, the campaign sued over late mail-in ballots allegedly being counted. The judge dismissed it again for lack of evidence.
Yep. Trump's claims are being thrown out in the courts all over the country. Michigan courts, Georgia courts, federal courts, even food courts are like, man, get your bullshit out of this Panda Express, Donald. He's getting thrown out of court so fast, the bailiffs don't even say, all rise. They're just like, nah, y'all can keep sitting, man. We won't be here long. Yeah, y'all just stay where you is. And here's the thing, guys. Everyone knows Trump lost. Even Donald Trump knows that he lost. You know how you know this? You realize you haven't seen his face since they called the race? He hasn't shown it. You think that if Donald Trump really thought he'd won, he'd be hiding? No. We know this guy. The guy would be holding a victory rally every single day. He'd be flying around the country on top of Air Force One, doing that weird jerk-off dance that he does. And just so we're on the same page, reporters haven't found widespread voter fraud. Election officials haven't found it. And even the courts haven't found it. So now, Republicans are putting out a mass call for voter fraud investigation volunteers.
Republicans continue to search for widespread issues. In Texas, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is offering up to $1 million to incentivize, encourage, and reward people for reports of voter fraud, even though there has been no evidence of any there.
Right now we're in an evidence gathering phase. That's why we have a hotline, and that we're asking people to let us know if they have any of these irregularities that they saw. We'll pursue them, and then we will pursue legal action.
The Trump campaign has set up this voter fraud hotline, basically, where it could field calls about these allegations of voter fraud. I'm told, actually, a lot of those calls have been prank calls that have been coming in.
Oh, man, these poor Trump lawyers. They're going to be getting into court like, Your Honor, I have a sworn affidavit proving voter fraud from a Mr. Seymour Butts and his good friend, Ben Dover, and they're both very concerned. Wait a minute. But what do they expect? What do they expect? You're going to ask people to call in? What do you expect? The only calls anyone makes anymore are prank calls. Any other reason, you just text. Even when your granny calls you now, she's like, hello, sweetie, is your refrigerator running? Well, then maybe you should catch it, you loser. I also love how that one guy is offering $1 million for evidence of voter fraud. $1 million. That's how you know there's no voter fraud, man. You never offer $1 million for shit you think might actually happen. It's always like, oh yeah, I'll give you $1 million if Cheryl goes to the prom with you. If you ask me, the real surprise here isn't that the campaign was so desperate that they set up a fraud hotline. It's that they're not charging $3.99 a minute for it. You guys have only got like 70 more days to profit off this presidency. Come on, Donald. There's no time to waste. And I know it may seem like a long shot that someone would just come forward with a piece of evidence that would blow this whole thing wide open and hand the election to Donald Trump. But guess what? Last night, that's exactly what happened-ish.
A woman claiming to be a Nevada poll worker telling Laura Ingraham last night about the fraud that she says she witnessed firsthand.
I went out to go for a walk on my break, and I probably had a 150, 175-foot stretch where I was walking. The Biden van was parked along this stretch, and I was walking to it, so about 150 feet. I was walking, and I could see these people hand over what appeared to be white envelopes, just hand over onto this table. And as I got closer, the envelopes were being torn open. There were two people dropping the envelopes and two people ripping them open and turning and facing the van and drawing on them or marking them. And as I walk by, one of them looks at me, and the whole line moves as I walk by them. And it scared me.
Oh my God! Fox News found T-Pain. I wondered what happened to him. Seriously, I don't know what that was, but that voice sounds like what a robot sounds like when they go through puberty. And don't worry, Jared, any day now. It's gonna happen any day now. And look, I understand why that whistleblower was scared and they wanted to hide their identity. I mean, vote fraudsters are some of the most dangerous, violent criminals around. when they get put in prison, they find the biggest, baddest dude in the prison yard, and they vote right in his face. Whew. Dangerous. Also, it's crazy that you... Sorry, hold on. Okay, my control room is telling me that there's another anonymous poll worker who wants to tell us about election fraud. Wow! This is really weird because I don't have a control room or an earpiece, but I want to get to the bottom of this. So joining us now in a Daily Show exclusive is an anonymous poll worker.
What up, African? Hello, Trevor Noah. We have never met.
Okay, that's a little bit weird, but thank you so much for joining us. Let's get straight into this. You say that you have witnessed voter election fraud?
Yeah. It was crazy, man. So I was down in Philadelphia, right? I'm counting ballots down in Philadelphia. I look to my right. It's a dude wearing a Joe Biden t-shirt, and he tearing up ballots for Donald Trump. And I asked him, I go, hey, bro, what are you doing? He said, I'm committing voter fraud for Joe Biden. It was crazy. He said it just like that.
Wow, that is really crazy and very specific.
And it wasn't just that. I looked to my left, and that was Joe Biden. Joe Biden was standing right there in the Philadelphia. Joe Biden was standing right there with a bunch of Black Panthers. They was Xeroxing ballots. And I said, hey, man, ain't you Joe Biden? He looked at me. He said, shh, yes, this is a true story. And so then I was so messed up by that, man. I went out to the parking lot to take a smoke, right? And I'm out in the parking lot. There's a karate sensei. This karate sensei had all his karate students. They had all the Donald Trump ballots. They had them all stacked up, and they was chopping them like wooden boards. Chopping up ballots for Trump, man. I'm telling you what I saw. I know what I saw.
Okay, enough of this. Roy, I know it's you.
No, it's not me. This is not Roy.
It's you, man. I know by your karate chop. Only one person does karate chops like that. It's you, Roy. Just turn on his lights. I know it's Roy.
That's not me. That's not me.
It's not. Hey, Trevor, what's up, man? You was just talking to the poll worker that was here? That's crazy. Crazy seeing you.
Roy, what are you doing? What are you doing? I know you're not a Trump supporter. Why would you be working with him to undermine the election?
First off, no, I'm not a Trump supporter, bro. But I am a supporter of getting $1 million. I'm gonna tell you that right now. You saw what that dude from Texas said? Hell, I'm trying to get paid. You crazy?
Roy, this is unethical, though, man. You're helping to spread claims of voter election fraud. It's gonna undermine America's democracy.
I didn't think about that, Trevor. I didn't think about that, and you were right. This election, America's democracy is too valuable to risk losing its integrity over a couple of false allegations. All right? I take back everything I said, man.
Thank you so much.
If Joe Biden gives me $1 million.
Roy, there's no money. You know what? Cut his camera. Cut this. We're done.
There's money. There could be money. Hey, turn my lights back on.
No.
Turn my lights back on.
Turn everything off. There's no money for you, Roy.
Turn my light. Hey, Trevor.
Sorry, guys. I really thought we had a real scoop there. Tell you what. When we come back, we'll look at some fun news to get all of this Trump taste out of our mouths. And then, don't forget, Halsey is joining us on the show. So stick around.
This episode of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah Ears Edition is brought to you by Allbirds and their new line of Trino shirts and coats. Allbirds is on a mission to leave the planet like the Allbirds.
Ongoing segment, A Ray of Sunshine. Let's kick it off with professional golf, the only sport that requires a chauffeur. There's a tradition at the Masters tournaments where players will try to skip their ball over the water hazard during practice. But even that wasn't enough showing off for one golfer this weekend.
As PGA players ready for this weekend's Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia, golfer John Rahm showed off during yesterday's practice round, skipping his ball on purpose across the pond and onto the green on the 16th hole. The ball tracks around the edge of the green, funnels toward the flagstick, and rolls into the cup. It was a hole-in-one, if you can believe that.
Okay, that was insane. But it also sucks that it was during the practice round. The perfect shot when it doesn't count. I feel bad for that guy. Because we've all had that day, you know? When you're staying at home, but all of a sudden you're having the perfect hair day, everything looks tight. Then the next day you have a date, and it's the one day where you wear your underwear outside your pants, and you're like, crap, man, you should have seen me on Sunday. I was looking so fly. But you know who I really feel bad for? Is the guy behind him on the course, because how do you top that shot? You can't just get a hole-in-one, because he did that. And he skipped the ball across the pond. The next guy's going to have to try and skip his cart across the pond. Oh, shit! And I do hope that the PGA learns from this moment, because this video got over 10 million views in just a few hours, which never happens for a golf highlight. So clearly, what golf needs is more fun trick shots. Bring in more tricks. Add a few obstacles. Maybe a tunnel where first dates can share an awkward kiss. Some windmills. Now that's the kind of game people want to watch. Wait, that's a thing? But let's move on to some good news for people who love reading, but also love convenience.
All right, forget the usual vending machines you might find on college campuses.
A couple of new dispensers at BYU are offering food for thought.
A vending machine full of short stories.
Fighting and pulling, she wept at once with sudden, wild abandonment.
These stories are from around the world. There are some translations, there are classics, there's contemporary literature. We've had them up for about a week, and we've dispensed almost 2,000 stories already.
They said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills.
Why go to a candy dispenser when you can have a piece of good literature instead?
Why go to a candy dispenser when you can have a piece of good literature instead? I mean, this is a cool idea, but I feel bad for the kids who went to her house on Halloween last week. Who wants Three Musketeers? Yay! By Alexandre Dumas. Ah, let's egg this house. Also, I'll tell you this. You do not want to get the wrong vending machine after you've been out drinking all night. Can you imagine? You just wanted some Doritos, and now the whole town is throwing rocks at some lady? Like, what the hell? And it's extra awkward if one gets stuck, because, I mean, you can't shake a machine that's full of, like, short stories. I paid for a terse allegory about growing old. God damn it, give it to me! Although, if you ask me, they should combine the two things and have a vending machine where they print the story on a bag of Funyuns. Yeah, then you can eat while you're reading. Oh, it was a dark and stormy night. And Catherine's heart was aflame. And finally, a really heartwarming story about a New Yorker and her new feathered friend.
What a turnaround for this one-time sick swan. Tonight, the story of a woman out for a ride on her bike who discovered the swan and helped to save her life.
While taking in the beautiful day, she noticed a lone swan who could barely move.
I just couldn't leave her there, so I approached really slowly with my jacket to try to throw it over her body and her head.
Ariel carried the 17-pound frightened swan for a mile back to her bike. Some kind driver stopped to give them a lift to the subway station. Then they hopped on the A train. Fellow strap hangers didn't even do a double take when they saw Bay, named after Jamaica Bay, minding her own on the train like any other commuter.
New Yorkers are just so used to so many crazy things happening that it doesn't faze them.
Yeah, of course no one is surprised by a swan on the subway. This is New York. Last year I got mugged by a duck. Oh, shit. But it's true, people. Nothing phases New Yorkers on the subway. You look up from your phone, and there's a swan. There's a guy jerking off. There's a swan jerking off. You just go back to your phone. No eye contact. That's the rule. Although, I do think it's funny that swans get better health care in America than humans. Because, like, imagine a guy throws a bag over your head, tosses you in a van, and then takes you to get your mole checked out for free. Tell me that's not better than your insurance plan. But kudos to this lady for caring enough about a swan to carry it onto the subway. Although I don't know why, when she does it, she's a hero, but when I do it, I'm banned from the zoo for life. How is that fair? Oh, and in case you're wondering, the woman and the swan made it to their destination safely, and guys, things are going swimmingly.
Ariel promptly brought the swan to the Wild Bird Fund on the Upper West Side, where she used to work and where she knew Bay would get proper care. Bay loves her kibbles and salad. You can tell she's happy by her hearty appetite and her wagging tail. She's having such a great time, workers here noticed Bay started honking to a male swan in the other room. So they let the pair swim together. Who knows, maybe this rescue story will turn into a love story by the time the swans are healthy enough to go back into the wild.
All right, hold on. The swan is getting it too good now. Now it's got free healthcare and salad and a man. I mean, it's a beautiful story, but it's going to make single people feel like shit. Homeless birds are finding love during a pandemic, and my lonely ass is eating cold chicken in my underwear? Well, congratulations on finding true love, Subway Swan. And I know people will tell you that it won't work because you're from different worlds. I mean, you're from Jamaica Bay. He's from the Upper West Side. People will say that it won't work, but remember, in the end, you're just two beautiful animals who love to peck children's eyes out. All right, when we come back, Michael Costa goes down to Mexico for some recreational surgery. And Halsey is still coming up on the show, so stay tuned.
I'm Shonda Rhimes. If you've watched Grey's Anatomy or any of my TV shows, then you know I love to tell.
You guys hear that? That's so. I won't stop making that noise until she gets the door open. Here, let's try this. You want the door? You want to go outside? Go outside? Oh, this one too? Okay. Guys, welcome back to another amazing episode of All Wow High. And guess what? We did it. We listened to the news, we did yoga, got a whole episode of Today Explained in, and half an episode of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Daily social distancing show, so I should correct myself. And we did it all while high. All we need now is an affirmation. To set up my grow tent or not to set up my grow tent. Noodle, don't noodle. You're too worried about what once was and not what will be. However, there's a saying. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today's a gift. That's why they call the present. Guys, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you on another amazing episode of All Wild.